My name is Gerald Howard. I'm on the board of this institution, and I want to welcome you to TGIF PPL. Great music, smart talk, and then free pizza. Really, how much doesn't get better than that, right? It's such a pleasure to be here with my friend and former author Jim Kaplan to talk about the music behind this book, Three Shades of Blue, Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Bill Evans, and The Lost Empire of Cool, with one of the best subtitles I've come across. So the blue in the title is an allusion to the album Kind of Blue, which is by reputation the best-selling jazz album of all time, and maybe the best jazz album of all time, but reasonable minds can disagree. And all three of Jim's subjects played on that album. But the point of this is not just the book, the point is the music. And this is, as I said in my letter, meant to be a listening party, guided by Jim, who knows his onions. And we're gonna try to pitch it at a level where to satisfy people who are like jazz curious, to people who are jazz fans. I'll just say that I believe that jazz, and especially the jazz of this period, is one of the greatest contributions America has ever made to not just musical culture, but culture in general. And I'm sure Jim, who has some thoughts about that. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim Kaplan, our DJ guide, and take it away, Maestro.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
The mic is working. Good. 1959 was an incredible year in jazz. It saw 4 monumental jazz albums come out. There was Mingus, Charles Mingus's great album. There was Dave Brubeck's Time Out. There was Ornette Coleman's The Shape of Jazz to Come. And there was Kind of Blue, which, as Jerry said, many consider the greatest of them all. And probably as some kind of evidence for that, it continues to sell. It continues to sell. It's the best-selling jazz album of all time, and for a reason. 1959 was also a very strange year. There's a jazz trumpeter named Nicholas Payton, who in 2011 wrote a manifesto online saying on why jazz isn't cool anymore. And he said a lot of things in that piece. Very smart guy, very good piece. He said 2 things. One, he said, jazz stopped being cool in 1959. Which is a puzzling statement. And I'd like everybody to sort of think on that a bit. Maybe we can talk about it at the end, argue for it or against it. The other thing he said was jazz separated itself from popular music. Big mistake. So let's think about those. I'd like to play a few things today that speak to the 3 principles of this book. Miles Davis, who I was incredibly lucky to have interviewed for Vanity Fair in 1989.
And he lived.
Yeah, he was a sweetheart. He was a total pussycat. He couldn't have been nicer. I was terrified, but he couldn't have been nicer. But there were 6 musicians, 6 wonderful musicians who made this album. It wasn't just Miles and Coltrane and Evans. It was also Cannonball Adderley, Paul Chambers, and Jimmy Cobb. But I thought from the beginning that Coltrane and Miles and Evans were really the geniuses, the three geniuses of this album. And my idea, which I took to my publisher, Penguin, was to write a book about these three guys, these three geniuses, before, during, and after, as men and musicians, before, during, and after the making of Kind of Blue. Let's start off with just a little bit of that great album. I get goosebumps every time, every single. It is, you know, the great and knew he was great, or literary critic Harold Bloom called Bud Powell's wonderful piece Un Poco Loco one of the most important works of this examples of the sublime in the 20th century. And I don't know why Harold Bloom left out so why. But here you have all three, and of course Paul Chambers' beautiful bass portion to begin. So you have all three of them, and I'd like to go back a little bit in time and chart where these guys came from.
Can I just say this, in the course of this, any questions, any comments?
Yeah.
I meant it about a conversation. If there's something you want to observe about it, a question you want to ask, feel free. I want it to be open, but proceed.
So just a little bit about Miles to start. Miles was a young Black prince from St. Louis. He did not come out of poverty. He did not come out of a rural area. His father was a very successful dentist, Miles Dewey Davis II. Miles himself was Miles III. Miles rode horses as a boy. He dressed from Brooks Brothers as a young man. And he was crazy about jazz from the very beginning of his life. He discovered Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie and knew that was where he had to be and what he had to do. And lo and behold, one day in 1943, Billy Eckstine brings his big band to St. Louis with two of its musicians, Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. And Miles Davis, actually, Miles kept on going to hear them whenever they played while they were on their stand in St. Louis. And he would always take his trumpet along with him, which I have said, it's a little bit like a kid taking his tennis racket to the US Open, right? But at a certain point, one of the musicians came running up to Miles and asked him if he had a union card. And even though Miles at that time was only 17, he did have a union card. And so he filled in that night for Dizzy, who was sick. Anyway, Miles was extremely shy at that point. And even his trumpet could barely be heard. Billy Eckstine later said couldn't be heard beyond the reed section. But Miles somehow, it was party talk, but Miles managed to extract a promise from Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker that if Miles was ever in New York, they would be glad to see him. Miles gets his father to send him to Juilliard, to send him to New York City on the condition that Miles enroll in Juilliard. Miles enrolls in Juilliard, but Miles very quickly walks out of Juilliard and hunts down Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, and then lo and behold, Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker break up, mainly because Dizzy cannot stand Charlie Parker's unreliability anymore. Charlie Parker is not only a monumental genius, he's a monumental heroin addict, constantly pawning everything he owns and anything anybody else owns to buy drugs. They break up and Charlie Parker hires Miles Davis, 18 years old, to play along with him. Everybody was in the jazz world in New York City was flabbergasted. They had no idea why Charlie Parker had done this. But here is just a little taste of what they did together. This was Miles trying to channel Dizzy Gillespie. And good luck with that. Miles realized he was not Dizzy Gillespie. He couldn't play that fast and he couldn't play that high. And so Miles had to turn himself into something else.
Yeah, I mean, I have a considerable Miles Davis fixation, but one of the things that you have to realize about him, technically, he wasn't that hot. I mean, it's fine, but there are like a dozen other trumpeters who could outplay him in what the technical sense, you know, faster, louder, more, but then there's the genius factor.
Yeah.
Nobody else sounded like him. Nobody else had the lyricism and plus balls.
Yeah.
That he had.
The thing I always say about Miles is that he had this unique combination of, in his playing, seeming warm and distant simultaneously. I can't think of any other player who you can say that about, really. But we'll hear a little bit more of him in a moment. Did you want to say something else, Jerry,
No,
before we proceed along?
go, it's your turn.
John Coltrane was in the Navy during World War II. He was not in combat. He was stationed in Hawaii, and he played some music there with the Navy band. He also formed a little group, and they even did some recording. And then he mustered out of the Navy. He was a passionate player, passionate practicer of his instrument, which for a while was the alto sax. But of course, that was Bird's instrument. That was Charlie Parker's instrument. And Coltrane had to learn how to throw off the overpowering influence of the greatest alto saxophonist of all, Charlie Parker. So he switched to tenor. He served an apprenticeship, John Coltrane did. He got out of the Navy and he began playing with R&B bands. And for the next 10 years, he wandered in the desert, figuratively speaking, playing successively with Jimmy Valentine, an R&B vocalist, with an R&B artist named King Colax. And then you may have heard of Eddie Cleanhead Vincent, not only an instrumentalist, but a vocalist. I have a little bit here, a little taste of, I believe it was the very first time that John Coltrane ever appeared on a commercial recording. And this is a little number from 1949, Billy Valentine's R&B band, and it's a little thing called Beer Drinking Baby.
So
yeah.
just to observe back when Downbeat, the jazz magazines existed, they used to have a feature called where they would have a musician and they would play cuts blindfolded, and the musician, who's that? I just don't think anybody would listen to that cut.
Beer Drinking Baby.
Oh yeah, that's John Coltrane.
Yeah.
I mean, he's kind of a journeyman at that point.
Very much a journeyman, and he really John Coltrane was a strange, complicated man. He's a deeply melancholy man who had suffered enormous loss. He lost his father when he was 12 years old, his beloved grandfather a couple of years later, and always melancholy, but always extremely diligent to the point of passion about practicing his saxophone. And but he was also self-effacing. And so that apprenticeship that he served for that decade between 45 and 1955, he conceivably could have done a lot better. He could have recorded with better people. He could have made more of himself. He could have put himself forward more, but he played with those R&B bands. He did something called walking the bar from time to time. And when you're playing with King Colax in some little gin mill down south, as a saxophone player, you have to get up on the bar, you have to walk along the bar playing your saxophone. And Coltrane felt tremendously humiliated by this. And one time, one of his friends walked into the bar, and when Coltrane spotted him while he was standing up there playing, he threw down his instrument, jumped off the bar, and ran out of the place. He was so embarrassed. So Miles, going back to Miles for a moment. Miles, and I'm compressing a lot of history into a very small space, but we have to move this along. Miles plays with Bird for a little while. Miles goes to Paris in 1949 with an all-star band. And he is astonished to find himself in Paris being treated not as a second-class citizen, not as a black man, but as a human being. And he falls in love with a Parisian singer, a young woman named Juliette Greco. And he really wants to stay in Paris. He's in Paris in the spring and he's in love and he's playing jazz. But he happens to have a wife and a couple of kids living back in Queens. He comes back to the United States and is so depressed to be coming back to this land of Jim Crow that he becomes a heroin addict. And he suffers this addiction for the next 5 years, 1949 to 1954. He tries numerous times, kick the habit. He fails and fails and fails and fails, but finally succeeds. And we're going to listen to just a little bit of Miles when he's finally coming out of his heroin years. He has a wonderful quintet, including the great Sonny Rollins, who is still with us unbelievably today. And we're going to listen to something called, it's a very interesting moment in Miles's career, and I'll tell you why in a second. That this is the very first time on record that Miles Davis is creating his signature sound playing harmon mute instead of open trumpet. He sounds happy, and he is happy because he's freed himself from drugs. He's about to get signed to Columbia Records at the 1955 Newport Jazz Festival by a wonderful man named George Avakian, who I was fortunate enough to know. George Avakian worked with Miles. He signed Miles to Columbia. He worked with Frank Sinatra too, and that's why I think George. Bill Evans. Bill Evans was a classically trained pianist. He was a genius classical pianist who happened to fall in love with jazz as a teenager. And Bill Evans, living in New Jersey as a teenager, turned himself into the fastest boogie-woogie pianist in New Jersey. I don't know who laid that title on him, maybe he laid it on himself, but he was really good. He goes to Louisiana to go to college and study music, and he continues playing classical piano, but he continues being obsessed with jazz. And in 1955, when he's still 25, 26 years old, he saved up a little money, he goes to New York City, and he tells himself if he doesn't make it in a year in jazz, he's going to go back home and quit and give it up. And he plays weddings, he plays bar mitzvahs, he plays all kinds of gigs. He spends a lot of time on the subway. He manages to land a gig at the Village Vanguard, playing in the intervals, because the stars at the Village Vanguard at that point had the Modern Jazz Quartet, who were very famous, very popular, very successful at that point. And whenever Modern Jazz Quartet played, the entire room at the Village Vanguard, and if you've been there, you know the room is very small and intimate, goes hushed. And whenever they take a break, and Evans is sitting there playing the piano during the break, everybody starts to talk and clatter silverware and plates. And anyway, one night Evans is playing during the interval while Modern Jazz Quartet is taking a break. And Evans looks down along this grand piano, and there at the end of the piano, he sees two very dark and penetrating eyes staring at him. Those eyes belong to Miles Davis. And a week later, out of the blue, Evans's phone rings, and it's Miles. And Miles says, join my band. And when Miles said, join my band, you joined Miles's band. Anyway, we're gonna hear just a little piece of Evans after he has, after he is, everybody is hearing Bill Evans play, and I'm stepping back in time a little bit from when he joins Miles' band, and that was in mid-1958. But going back a year or two, Evans is playing all these places and people are listening to him and marveling at how good he is. And they want him to record. And there was a jazz guitarist named Mundell Lowe, who was very successful and thought Evans was terrific. And Mundell Lowe called a record executive named Orrin Keepnews, who ran Riverside Records, which made a lot of great jazz albums, and played him a tape of Evans playing the piano. And so Orrin Keepnews signs Bill Evans in 1956 to Riverside, and Evans makes his first album. It is called New Jazz Conceptions. And it's a wonderful album, shows a lot of influence of Bud Powell, but then there's a lot of original Bill Evans emerging too. And the album New Jazz Conceptions by Bill Evans sells 800 copies. But here's Bill Evans. Miles used to call Bill Evans at 3 a.m. when Miles couldn't sleep. And Bill Evans would put the phone on top of his piano and play for Miles, and Miles was able to go to sleep. And not because Bill Evans was a boring pianist, but because he was a sublime piano player. Miles heard something in Evans's playing that nobody had heard before. And both Miles and Evans were great listeners from the beginning of their education. They would go to music libraries and borrow records of Rachmaninoff and Stravinsky. And they would write down those, they would read the scores, they would write down the chords, they would learn those sonorities that were in that amazing modern European Western classical music. And these were sounds that, unlike any jazz pianist heretofore, Bill Evans was able to bring to jazz. And that's why Miles hired him.
So if I could put in
Please.
my 2 cents here, just to criticize myself, when I was first getting into jazz and learning about it, what a jerk I was. I thought that Bill Evans was pretty much just a little bit above a cocktail lounge piano player. I wasn't.
No, listen, there were important jazz critics who said that in print.
Okay, I thought better or worse.
I'm trying to remember what the schmuck's name was, but I think he wrote for the New York Times, and he had a big
John
column.
Wilson?
I think it was John. I think it was John S. Wilson for the New York Times, wrote a big column about Bill Evans, and he said, "I'm sorry, I just don't get it. To me, this is cocktail music."
Well, I didn't get it for a while, and then
Yeah.
one day my ears opened and I got it.
Well, Wilson's ears never.
Yeah, the second thing
Yeah.
is, so it's interesting that Miles Davis liked to listen to, he listened to piano players.
Yeah.
More than trumpet players, because he also took a lot of inspiration from the great pianist who died last year, Ahmad Jamal.
Yes.
And he liked the spacing and the way that the notes that Ahmad Jamal did. So I mean, Miles Davis had big ears.
He had huge ears, and yeah, it was not just the lyricism of Ahmad Jamal, but as you said, it was where Ahmad Jamal put the space in his music, where he wasn't playing, along with where he was playing. Miles was a great he was a great devotee of space and simplicity. And one of the reasons that he wanted to make this album, Kind of Blue, was that he felt that jazz had gotten too busy, too many chords, too many jazz renderings. Listen, all the great American songbook, these were very important jazz renditions of songs like All the Things You Are, or Love for Sale, Cole Porter, Jerome Kern, geniuses and genius renditions of their songs. But Miles had had enough of that. He was a restless artist. He was a genius like Picasso. Picasso was never satisfied where he was. He always had to move on to the next thing. And Miles was the Picasso of American music. And in Evans, and then and now now we're stepping back a couple of years to 1955. Miles hires John Coltrane. And in 1955, nobody knew John Coltrane was. And so it was very similar to when Charlie Parker hired Miles. People were all saying, what he hired this guy for? But we're about to hear what he hired this guy for. Coltrane hid his light under the proverbial bushel for 10 years, playing with King Colax and Cleanhead Vincent. But here you see what he got out of those 10 years. This is genius. It's absolute genius. And Miles knew it the second he heard it. Miles called Coltrane the fastest, loudest saxophonist he had ever heard. He loved that. What he hated, however, was that at this point, Miles has kicked his heroin habit, but Coltrane is deep in the middle of his own heroin habit. And Coltrane starts missing gigs. He starts nodding out on the bandstand. It's no good. And Miles is furious at him. Well, it's easy to psychoanalyze and see that a guy who had hated himself for being a heroin addict, and heroin addicts are notoriously, they stop washing, they stop bathing, they stop changing clothes, they look terrible, they smell terrible. This was Coltrane in the midst of his addiction, and Miles fires him from his band. So Coltrane goes off, and and Jerry and I have talked about another one of our regrets. Jerry's maybe a year or two older than me, but it was theoretically, biologically possible for one of the two of us maybe to at least poked his nose into the 5 spot in the summer of 1957. Because Coltrane, as soon as he's fired by Miles, gets.
We've gotten our parents to take us.
Yeah.
Dad, can we go to the 5 spot?
It's on the Bowery, so it would hurt. Thelonious Monk hires Coltrane to play with him, and they do during the spring and summer of 1957 this legendary stand at the 5 spot. And I'd love to play you some of that, but we don't have time tonight. But they were so great that one night Miles comes in and he hears how great they are, and he hires Coltrane right back. Coltrane is starting to clean himself up. He's starting to wean himself from heroin, and Miles hires him back. And this is also the same time, right around the same time. Well, it's about a year later. Miles hires Bill Evans. And the next thing we're going to listen to is it is the complete band of Kind of Blue. It is Miles Davis, leader. It is John Coltrane. It is Cannonball Adderley. It is Bill Evans, Paul Chambers, and Jimmy Cobb. The first time they ever all recorded together, and it is a sublime work of art.
I've heard that about 100 times. I own it. It kills me every time. It's just so beautiful.
It's an amazing recording. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of story here. It's very complicated, and a lot of it is very unpleasant. This was on Green Dolphin Street, was recorded on Miles's 32nd birthday, May 26, 1958. And again, it's the whole Kind of Blue band there. And Evans has just joined the group earlier that spring. And he very shortly, I believe it was in November, leaves the group. a lot of things at play here. There is the fact, the uncomfortable fact that this is in Evans, this is a white man joining, being asked to join the greatest small jazz group in the world. And there was a huge amount of blowback about this at the time. Black musicians hated it. Black audiences hated it. And Evans was, of course, very aware of this. And Evans was this nerdy looking guy from New Jersey. He looked like a high school biology teacher. His hair was slicked back. He had horn-rimmed glasses, and he felt out of place. He was out of place in a lot of ways, except for the fact that he's a genius pianist. He started using heroin as soon as he joined Miles's band, and in order to, he thought, to blend in and become as hip as the rest of them, he set about making himself the biggest junkie in Miles's group, and he succeeded. And he left the band that same year, 1958. But then Miles pulled him back to make Kind of Blue in March of 1959. 2 sessions, March 2nd, April 22nd, they made Kind of Blue, and then Evans was off again. All 3 of these guys wanted to be leaders. Coltrane very much wanted to lead his own band, and he made, amazingly, he made the Titanic album, Giant Steps, just weeks after finishing making Kind of Blue. Of course, Coltrane is leader. And then Evans goes off and makes the rest of his career, his short career, because he only lived to age 51 in 1980, after he had abused his body for so long. But he became a trio musician. And there's all kinds of discussion about how far each of these subjects of my book progressed artistically. They all went off into in various ways. Coltrane, of course, became a tremendously abstract saxophonist. Miles sort of subtracted his playing more and more from his albums, but evolved as well. A lot of people felt that Bill Evans was the least evolved in his career, that he kept on playing in a similar way for the rest of his career. I don't know how I feel about that. One of the many people I interviewed for my book was the wonderful and brilliant pianist John Baptiste. And when I asked him about Bill Evans and Bill Evans's musical evolution, John Baptiste said that he thought that in many ways Evans went farther than Coltrane or Miles. And what did Baptiste adduce as evidence? It was the album that Evans made called Conversations with Myself, where he double-tracked himself playing on 2 pianos. I don't agree. But anyway, I'm going to play one last tune, and then let's talk a little bit.
From Kind of Blue.
From Kind of Blue, the final track. I want to just say 2 amazing things about the album. One, every track on this album, except for one, every complete take they recorded was a first take. It's inconceivable. It was a first take. And the other is that they had no scores. They weren't reading. Miles had written down a few notes, just sketched out some notes for each tune on paper and showed it to them, and rehearsed it a very little bit, and then they just played it. They played it, and it was it's an incomprehensible feat, really.
The miracle, I think, is the right word.
Yeah, miracle is the right. And I think that has an awful lot to do with why this album has endured.
So the liner notes for Kind of Blue are pretty legendary, and they were written by Bill Evans.
He could
And-
write.
who, yeah, really good piece of writing. And you compared what happened in the album to Japanese brush painting, where where you dip it in watercolor and you don't take it off the
Linen.
paper,
Yeah, or paper.
whatever you're on, it has to, so there's no room for error, and it's all, it has to be spontaneous.
No eraser on that brush.
Yeah, so, yeah, it really, it's perfect, and I think the liner notes did their part in helping people to understand this. This must have sounded really new in 1959.
A lot of people dismissed it at first.
Yeah.
There were a number of critics who said it was too quiet, too quiet. Miles should be making more of a statement here.
Right. Anyway, that's that's jazz. If you have any questions or any observations for Jim, I'd really, yeah, Tony.
How long did the three of them actually play together?
Well, there was the year of 1958 when they played together for around 8 months, 9 months in 1958. And then that was pretty much it, except for Kind of Blue.
So.
The rest of the group, some of the rest of the group went on. Wynton Kelly also, Wynton Kelly, great pianist, very different from Bill Evans, but Miles, to Wynton Kelly's great surprise and Evans's great surprise, Miles brought Wynton Kelly in to play on one track on the album, Freddie the Freeloader. Wynton Kelly went on to tour with Miles and the rest of the group when Evans was off doing something else. But really only those 8 months in 1958 and the making of Kind of Blue, and that was it.
So I wasn't familiar with Evans much before this. The other two obviously had titanic careers on their own. But do you think that they made each other better, or was this album just a result of three extraordinary talents in the same place at the same time?
I certainly, well, Miles said, I designed this album around the piano playing of Bill Evans. That was a major statement. So that certainly says something about their artistic relationship, as does the telephone call in the middle of the night. Coltrane was being Coltrane. He was great already. I think that Cannonball Adderley was completely knocked out by Coltrane and was greatly inspired by him. I'm not really answering your question, except to say that that each of the three was already great in his own way, and they all rose to the occasion. I think that's how I would put it. So,
I think you made an interesting point about musicians not really having a score in front of them. That
yeah,
basically you had a one pager with 12 bars on it.
yeah,
And that, although Miles Davis wrote all blues, all the musicians who played on it wrote all blues.
yes,
And each tape would have been different, but probably equally great.
yeah.
And that doesn't surprise me that they took the first take probably because of the expense of the recording studio, but another alternate take would have been great, but it would have been an alternate take of greatness.
Miles was not worrying about recording costs. That was not the point with Miles.
But my point being that
Yeah.
all the musicians contributed to the composition. And if you look at a typical Facebook page for all blues, it just has the bare bones chord changes
Yeah.
with the melody on top. And that,
And I just want to say, All Blues is a very interesting composition in that the way the solos work, it's not a direct handoff. It is each solo contained within its own sort of musical capsule on the song. In other words, there is this vamp, this beautiful bum, boom, boom, boom. The beautiful vamp with played by Cannonball and Coltrane behind. And then the soloist will come in, play his solo, and then the vamp, and then the next soloist throughout. And there's not really another song, jazz song I know that's really like that.
Who was the producer for this and,
This was before Teo Macero.
Yeah.
It was, right, this is a story in itself, and here,
I just think, I remember this was taking place in within the confines of the largest, probably, I guess, record company in the country. And, you know, they had bottom line, concerns and all of that, but clearly the producer knew what he had, right?
yeah, the producer knew what he had, and the producer knew to stay out of Miles's way and just keep the tape. And the tape and the master tape and the security tape, both tapes running. In fact, I think that, and they made 2 tapes just in case something happened to the master tape. And in fact, I think they had to use the security tape for the eventual album, because I think something happened to the master tape.
Yikes.
Yeah. So you had a question?
Yeah, well, it's actually a statement. No one has ever heard Ahmad Jamal and the Spacing. The Not For Me album on Ponciana, you'll see. what-
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
What a
That's such a
beautiful-
great album.
Oh, it is a great.
You've been
album.
listening to
You know, I bought this so many times.
Yeah.
I listen to it when I get blue.
Yeah. There's so many people have bought Kind of Blue in every media, every successive medium, first LP, 8-track, cassette tape, CD, stream, whatever, or worn out 4 CDs of it.
Yeah.
It just lasts. Anybody else?
On the idea of the lost empire, am I reading that? Of
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Had by 1959 had the definition of cool, but changed.
well, you know what, I'm gonna confess something here. Jerry complimented my subtitle before, and I'm grateful for the compliment. It's a tricky subtitle, and it's tricky because the word cool means a lot of things to a lot of people. And there were these recordings that Miles made in 1949 with his friend Gil Evans, The Birth of the Cool. And these were arrangements on charts that the musicians, these were nonette recordings, nine players, including Miles. And everything was written down, and there were musicians. Dizzy Gillespie wasn't a fan at first. He felt that there's no way I can repeat what Dizzy said without saying exactly what he said, but Dizzy said jazz is sweating your balls. This is not that kind of music, and it didn't sound that way at first. So that was a certain kind of cool. It was a little bit cooler, literally, a little bit more removed, more schematic, more planned out than head arrangements or improvised jazz. That's one definition of cool. Another definition of cool in the 1940s and 50s had to do with drugs, had to do with using heroin. And among jazz musicians in the 40s and 50s, this terrible myth arose. It all had to do with Charlie Parker, who was the greatest of them all and the biggest heroin addict of them all. And young musicians would say to each other, if you want to play like Bird, you have to do like Bird. And so they all began shooting up heroin, and they just died like flies. I have lists of them in my book.
And when you and I did a conversation about this
Yeah.
book, when it was published in hardcover, there are some astonishing, I recommend, by the way, that this book is terrific, and you really ought to buy a copy, because it's not just about the music. It's a cultural education. But one of the astonishing and disturbing things that you get out of the book is Carolyn and these musicians, and why did they do it? And in part it was I think Sonny Rollins says, well, it's just a screw you to the white world. in a
He
way.
said that to me in so many words. I got to interview Sonny Rollins for this book, and he said that I was amazed to hear this from him. He didn't say to me heroin was and Sonny Rollins kicked. Sonny Rollins checked himself into the Lexington Correctional Facility, the federal correctional facility in Lexington, Kentucky in 1955.
What a place to be, right?
What a place to be. A lot of jazz musicians went there. Miles tried it. He didn't even try it. He bounced off of it. Some succeeded, some failed, but Sonny Rollins succeeded in kicking heroin for the rest of his life. So I was expecting when I interviewed him for him to say what an evil thing heroin was, and that's not what he said. He said it was our way of rebelling against white society in the 1950s. And you had to be there and you had to be not white to understand what he was really talking about. So as for the first subtitle I thought of for this book, I was always going to call it 3 Shades of Blue. And originally I was going to call it, the subtitle was going to be Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Bill Evans, and the Lost Dream of Jazz. Well, that sounded nice and it sounded dreamy, but I realized after living with it for about 2 weeks, it wasn't going to sell books.
And so it's a little downbeat.
It's a little downbeat and it's a little hazy, and it's also putting the word jazz right up front. And as I say at the beginning of my book, jazz is a complicated things, and these days it doesn't have a very good reputation. And in this book, thank goodness, I'm very happy and grateful about this, is doing very well and it's selling very well. And I think a lot of it has to do with people just looking at the cover and thinking, huh, Lost Empire, cool. What is that all about? Cool. And so I'm getting to play a little fast and loose with that word cool that has so many different definitions.
Thank you.
Long answer to your question.
Wow.
Very good.
One more, and maybe time for pizza and conversation.
Yeah.
That sounds to me like a really great way to come back to your original.
I'm sorry,
I said that last statement sounds to me like a really great way to come back to your original comment when you quoted the pundit who said that this was definitely the end of something. Very beginning,
The pundit,
at the very beginning, when you start to speak,
yeah,
right, you referenced how somebody referred to this, what was it?
New York Times.
oh, John S. Wilson.
Right,
Well,
so,
he was.
so bring us back to that and talk to us a little bit.
Well, I'm not sure it had to do with cool. I think Wilson was just, he wasn't hearing really he wasn't hearing the depth of what Bill Evans was feeling. John Wilson was calling Bill Evans's playing anodyne. He was calling it saccharine. He was calling it thin and shallow background music. Exactly, dinner music. Cocktail music. So it's not so much about cool. I think that Jerry said before, Miles had big ears. Miles had huge ears. Miles was able to hear the Stravinsky and the Rachmaninoff and Ravel, especially Ravel. Sorry, I left that out. In Evans's playing that Miles loved so deeply himself and wanted to put in his own albums, and so that's why I hired Evans.
So have some pizza, talk to the author, buy the book, and thanks for coming out.
Thank you so much.